Welcome to the Savage Worlds GM podcast. I'm your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning. Tonight's episode brought to you by Roll20.net, the world's largest virtual tabletop. Check them out today at Roll20.net. Check us out on Twitter and Facebook, SWGM Podcast. We do have a new YouTube branded channel now at YouTube/Savage Worlds GM Podcast. Check that out. Join us on the Patreon. Join the Patreon. And if you are a member of the Patreon, tonight we will be playing Savage Worlds Game Master Podcast Bingo Drinking Game. If you're there, the post is there. The cards are available for download. Feel free to play. If you're printing off a card, go ahead and mark Jib drops due to technical difficulties because it happened. Tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about sci-fi. Ergo, the title, Blinded Me with Science. I want to start talking about just the different flavors of science fiction that you can run using Savage Worlds as a resource, from the core rules up through either the superpowers companion, the sci-fi companion, maybe even taking your favorite setting and putting some sci-fi funk all over it. If you want to play, ray guns and bubble helmets, there's a couple great settings for that. We can talk about that as well. And if you've always ever wanted to run Firefly, Star Trek, or Star Wars, maybe we'll talk about that too. If you're watching us in the live chat, the live streaming broadcast, feel free to participate in the chat. Dustin will be monitoring that and dropping those in for discussion. So here to discuss it, Chris, the Savage Mommy Fox.
Hello.
Dave, the Rules Maven Scott.
Greetings and salutations.
Dustin, the Savage Intern Smith. Ooh. So one of my favorite flavors of sci-fi is the low-tech, not so much wild space opera sci-fi. I'm a fan of the, wait for it, Aliens universe. I like that theme and feeling of science fiction where we do have just sublight, slower, just under the speed of light travel. But most of the galaxy is you got to climb in a cryotube to get there and spend weeks or months in transit.
Well, I think that it's an interesting thing to point out is that sci-fi is probably the largest genre out there when it comes to the stuff that we do in gaming. While fantasy is maybe the most overpopulated, sci-fi covers basically everything else because it's any fiction that is grounded in possible science. That's sci-fi. So, your Star Wars is more science fantasy, while Aliens is science fiction. But then again, sort of things like Steamscape Asia is a science fiction setting. So, you have to be very specific when you're talking about, well, I want to play sci-fi. I'll have people join up to a game all the time going, I want to play sci-fi. And their idea of sci-fi is Shadowrun or steampunk or
the Matrix,
starships in space. And it's like, okay, what kind of sci-fi do you want to play?
Right, and I think Savage Worlds being the fact that it's built and designed to be a generic, genre-less system, works very well for it. As a matter of fact, you could take the Savage Tale, the USS Kane, salvage of the USS Kane from the back of the core rules, and pretty much use that as a foundation for running a low-level, hard science fiction game. Mm-hmm. They have rules in there for space vac. Drought. It basically treats the vacuum of space as a hazard. There's rules in there about gravity. It really covers pretty much everything. And listen, a laser
right out of
weapon,
core.
Yeah, a laser weapon, an energy weapon, just does 2d6. Just skin it. Take any one of the regular pistols from Savage Worlds and just erase whatever name and put space laser, ray gun. Put whatever you want. It does 2d6. That's the same range.
Well, that's the interesting thing with the salvage of the USS Kane is it's one of those places where Savage Worlds teaches you something in the core rulebook that it doesn't actually have like a rules section for, where it actually retraps a hazard as something else, where it retraps some equipment and some gear as different things. It's one of those things we talk about all the time, just retrap it, give it a new skin. This is an example of that right in the core rules that no one pays attention to because it's a little one shot that half the people aren't even going to read out of the book.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, if you
I don't think I've ever seen anybody run one of those.
Oh, I've run the salvage of the SS Kane before. Whenever I was going to introduce some of my friends to Savage Worlds, it's one of the ones that I ran. But funny story, I had a couple of power gamers in there, and they decided to get in the vac suit and go outside the ship and try to get to the engine room via the outside. So I'm like, so let me get this straight. You want to get outside of the ship and go to the spot on the ship where the radiation is pouring out into space. And they're like, yes. Okay, so you're going to need to roll up some new characters.
Well, the very first time I ran a game online, I was running USS Kane, and Jared, because he freaking knows the thing, immediately recognized what I was running. So he has his character take a left turn and go right to the core of the adventure. Like, freaking moment one. That was one of those... He knows I'm a GM. He knows I know Savage World, so he's going to immediately put me to the test in my first time trying to run it online.
Good times, good times. So, and like I said, for those of you who are not sure what we're talking about, for the noobs in the audience, Savage Worlds has a specially set of rules that they collectively call hazards. This is anything from poison to starvation, thirst, hunger, lack of sleep, radiation, drowning, all of that good stuff. Cold, just dealing with a cold, exposure. So one of the things that you can very easily trap and do is just treat space as being underwater. If you don't have oxygen and a spacesuit for pressure, then you're basically faced with the drowning rules for the hazards. You can just very easily pick that rule up and start using it.
So does the intern want to read our first user question?
Why, yes, he does. Carlin Kendrick, topic question. In a sci-fi setting, how do you persuade players to go in alien, dangerous places when they can simply nuke it from orbit? Well, there's only one way to really be sure. There's got to be something valuable at the target.
Right. Well, like with any other good venture, too, there has to be some kind of communications relay issue where you can't launch the nuke from the ground.
Right.
So you guys are going immediately to like the hand of the GM creating a problem. I go the other direction on this entirely. Who says you have the ability to nuke it from orbit?
Right.
You might just be a plebe freaking engineer on the ship. You can't call it a nuclear strike.
I'm just like, do you know how much a nuclear bomb costs? I'm pretty sure it's up there in the millions. Are you going to pay for that, Skippy?
Yeah, I'm sure the owners of the corporation are going to be kind of pissed about their terraforming project going nuclear.
And everybody knows that the entire ship command staff, captain included, has to go down to the planet as the away team. Come on.
Right, of course.
Right. All the allied officers wear red shirts.
Right.
Military protocol always requires the entire officer corps to go to the same most dangerous place on every mission.
Right. All in one area. Not, you wouldn't want to separate them like Congress and the Senate, the president, the judicial branch. You don't want to keep them separate in an emergency. No, you want to club them all together for one nice, easy death-dealing target.
And yeah, it's the future, so they haven't invented things like drones or spy cams or, cameras on wheels. No, you have to walk in there all exposed.
Well, no, there's an interesting thing, and we covered this a little bit when we, more than 2 years ago now. But what do you do when, suddenly you're playing a game and you need drone stats?
Mm-hmm. You take the closest size the animal you can find in the bestiary and just use it.
Cats, dogs, and birds.
Yep.
Add construct and potentially armor. I'll tell you what, if you go into like the core book and pick up a cat and just add either flight or bolt to it, or even wall walker, you have a ready-made drone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's why Cat's in there, is to be
To
flexible
be a
enough.
drone.
Well,
To be a
to
drone.
be something, to be a small animal.
Yeah.
You know, think about if you added wall walker and poison, or if you added ensnare, or maybe disguise, you would have an alien animal to work with.
Right. Or once it gets there, it transforms into a drove of tinier drones, and you just treat it as a swarm.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, and if you really want drones, take cat or dog or direwolf, or go into with the fantasy companion and get hawk, or even just stick with something in the core and say, okay, well, this thing should be able to fly, so it does.
I remember first time I had a player tell me they wanted to run like a rigger style drone runner character, where they wanted to kind of have a control module and have like 6 or 8 robots out. I'm like, well, I can't necessarily see 6 or 8, but you could absolutely do that with weird science. And what's the power I'm thinking of that allows you to summon a beast?
Summon ally?
Yeah, summon ally. It's new power, summon ally, and it's, actually control beast or control drone, and bam, now when you activate that power, you're turning that thing on, and it's a weird science device, so it has its own power points, and you just reach in your pack and pull out the drone and turn it on and let it go.
You can take Beastmaster and have a permanent drone that's around.
As an extra character, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure. You can trap that edge as a drone. Absolutely.
Yeah, doesn't necessarily have to be an animal.
Right. I mean, let's be honest.
No.
Like if you want to do something like real steel, you can take allied extras. You can go to experienced soldier and bump it up to D8 fighting and just remove shooting, and that's it. Like, he's running a construct that's got the same stats as a soldier.
Well, and one of the other things to keep in mind with that is, there's a lot of different ways to do it. Obviously, we've talked about, Beastmaster. Well, Beastmaster, you run into now it's an AI drone that's piloting itself that the GM can screw with the player with, because they chose to go with an edge versus a power, and it brings a different role play aspect to it. Just like if you go with the Born a Hero and then let them take the legendary edge sidekick, well, now that drone can, every couple of adventures is strapping on new weapons and gear as you level that drone up like a regular character. I mean, you can do this a lot of different ways. It all depends on the story you want to tell and looking at which of the mechanics tells that story best. But drones are one of those things I hear people ask about quite a bit, is like, well, how do I do robots? How do I do drones? And it's like, it's not that hard.
You take something that exists and you make it a construct.
Well, I think the thing that the real trick in Savage Worlds is don't think of it as gear, think of it as character.
Yeah.
And then once you look at it through the filter of character, then all the options that we're talking about become very obvious. Like there's a mech sentinel in there. So, I want to do a mech thing where I climb inside it. Great. Just use the mech stats and make piloting rolls to control it, or use piloting rolls as a cooperative role to activate the mech's fighting skill, even though your character isn't, because you're piloting it and maneuvering it. Do you have to have the sci-fi companion to run that? No. If you want to go a little deeper and a little bit more complex, the sci-fi companion has a whole section on, hey, here's the way we do mechs.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions from people when I said I was doing my BattleTech conversion for Savage Worlds, wanting to see it. And I'm like, guys, you really don't need what I did. What I did was for my personal group to test some stuff. But what I did is I lifted walkers out of the sci-fi companion and tweaked the numbers to be closer to what the tech level is portrayed in that universe. It wasn't like it took a whole lot of work. The stuff's right there, and quite honestly, the walkers, the way they are built in the sci-fi companion, are pretty decently designed. I mean, it's yet again, it's one of those things where My problem with the sci-fi companion was always inflationary math. The core design of most of the stuff there, Peg put a lot of effort and a lot of knowledge of years of designing games into that sci-fi companion. It really does add a lot to your game if you give it a chance.
Yeah, it's pretty comprehensive. But so I mean, so let's talk about this. So you hear this all the time. Oh, I would kill for a decent Firefly conversion.
You
don't need it. Run Deadlands.
Yeah, run Deadlands in
Just pick up
space.
Deadlands and just say, "Oh no, we're in space."
Yeah,
there's nothing special you need to do. It's
and the El Cheapo gear. The fear level can be the fear of the
Reavers. Yep.
You know, or how far you are from core sets the fear level differently because it's that reduced tech level. There's a lot of different ways you could repurpose stuff like Deadlands for something like that.
Right. You can take the fear level for Deadlands, for example, and say, oh, this is about how close you are to Alliance territory and being caught. So when we go to the core rules of the Alliance territory, oh shit, the fear rating is like a 5 or 6. And in the outer rim territory, it's a -1.
If you look at it, it's already set up. It's already set up like that. The browncoats are the Confederacy, and the Alliance is the Union.
Mm-hmm.
And all right, I'll lay down a challenge for some of the players out there. If you have the Last Sons campaign, look at Dodge City. Take the NPCs and ask yourself, okay, what would go into this? If Mal Reynolds and Zoe were coming in to rob the bank, what would make it different? Like, what would make Dodge City different?
Well, but how do you do Reavers? Well, you pick up zombies and run them with give them Frenzy.
Frenzy and fleet-footed because the Reavers are fast.
Yeah. You could run them as a horde, run them as a swarm.
Yeah,
there's a number of things you don't need to go and recreate the wheel and come up with this intricate setting document and everything else to run Firefly. All the work's been done for you by Peg by creating Deadlands as a Western setting.
Mm-hmm.
That's 90% of what Firefly is. It's a freaking Western.
And plus, if you really, really wanted it, go out to Savagepedia. I can tell you, I know that there's some Savage Firefly stuff out there.
Yeah, there's
if you really want to look at it.
But they go like, oh, well, how do you do River Tam? Arcane background psionics?
Yeah, exactly.
Give her boost lower trait and Warrior's Gift.
Yep. Done. Well, how do you do healing? The same way you do healing in basic Savage Worlds. Do you have the tools and supplies? Well, you got the healing skill, go for it. It's really not complicated to run Firefly at all. Even if you don't have Deadlands, you could run Firefly with core.
Right.
Same thing holds true with Star Trek. Let's take a look at Star Trek real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's human.
Right.
They're just everybody's human. Spock's got pointy ears, and it's a role play. That's a role play choice. He's dedicated to logic and blah blah blah. So maybe you give him a hindrance. Val, no emotion. And you just play those hindrances. You don't need to go and create the Vulcan race. Now, if you want to really dive deep and have fun with it and enjoy tinkering, by all means, pick up the race creation rules and create a Vulcan.
Yeah.
Well,
which is really pretty darn easy. If you spend any time looking at the race creation, I know we talked about this in the past. I was doing Last Parsec, and I had a player who wanted to do his own race, and it took him about a half hour.
Well, I was going to say, if you take a look at some of the best Savage settings out there, the entire rules section in most of them clocks in at like 36 pages, and that's 36 fully formatted with art, like professional pages with column spacing and double size fonts, the whole 9 yards. I mean, they pack everything you change rules-wise in most settings in under 30 pages.
Yep.
That should tell you right there how capable the rule set in core is to run any of these things. 75% of most of the setting books that are available from any of the Savage Worlds licensees are a plot point campaign, a gazetteer, and a bestiary.
Yep. Absolutely.
With a couple of setting rules, or maybe a new skill or a new way of handling something like, economy or currency.
Or like they might add a new edge or a new hindrance. And if you get down to brass tacks, a lot of them are really edges and hindrances that have showed up in other places.
Oh, yeah. I can't count the number of setting books I've picked up where this is the same edge with a new name and a couple of the words changed to capture how it works differently in that setting than it does in any other setting. Because the big part of a licensee setting that you're paying for is they've gone through and done all the trapping work for you. They've taken, an edge like Lucky and punched it up a notch and given it, all the wrappings for, stupid luck or, a lucky criminal or, they've targeted in on that specific style and whatnot that they're trying to create. You don't need that at your table. It's great when you pay for it to get that extra done for you, but you don't need it. If you just look at core and do it for yourself, you're going to do that off the cuff automatically as you're trying to GM that genre. That's just the trapping work you're going to do normally.
Well, okay, so let's take a thing like something from the Star Trek universe that's pretty iconic to the Star Trek universe. Because I know that a lot of people are going to start trying to talk about, oh, well, how do you do transporters?
Teleport.
It's a plot device. You don't have to have setting rules for a transporter. It's a plot device.
If you don't absolutely have to, you could use something like the
teleport
power, but I wouldn't. I would just go the hand-waved plot device because it's a ubiquitous thing.
Right.
Just like, okay, to put this in perspective, take a look at the stats of the grenade listed in gear and compare it to the blast power. They are identical. The blast power has the benefit of being able to be pumped. You can either make it a large burst template or make it do more damage or make it affect heavy, do heavy weapons damage, etc. for an extra power point here or there. And then you can tack on your trappings effects where, that grenade does that damage and then also sets you on fire. All of those are things that the base grenade piece of gear already does right in core. So all of a sudden you want to run and do a transporter in Star Trek. Take a look at what they did there. This grenade is a ubiquitous piece of equipment. So they took a power, replicated it with a piece of gear. Take a power and replicate it with a piece of gear that's attached to the starship. So the requirement is they can only do it from a starship with that capacity. And then from there, they can send them anywhere.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you want to get really super technical, you could just put a galactic scale, a kilometer scale on teleport power and then build a teleporter if you want. Or, you have to have teleporter operation to run it.
Yeah, and then give the ship a stat for, quote unquote smarts, since teleport has it's a distance based on smarts. Give the ship a stat for that, so you know how many galactic scale units away the teleporter can send them.
Right,
a really powerful ship can teleport farther than a less powerful ship. Done.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's really a plot. It's a hand wave plot device, just like warp speed, a hand wave plot device. It doesn't matter. Now, phasers. Oh, how do you do stun settings? Well, you can go to the sci-fi companion. You really can. And there's a thing in there for stun weapons. But really, what does stun do? It's meant to basically shake you or cause you to lose, become exhausted from fatigue. So you could always go, hey, give me a vigor roll versus the damage to stay on your feet.
Right? Yep.
Done.
In ETU, Ed Wetterman did one that causes fatigue levels when they use a taser on you. But one of my favorites is the idea that when it hits you, it uses the stun power, but it has a number of rounds in which you cannot recover from the shaken that it causes.
Right.
You can't drop a Benny. You can't make your free unshake roll. You are shaken for 1d4 plus 1 rounds, and then after that, you remain shaken and can recover.
Right. I think that's what the taser does in ETU. I think there's a 1d4 rounds if it's successful.
There's 2 different tasers in ETU. But there's also obviously the stun rules in the Sci-Fi Companion. There's a handful of different ways that it's been done. So it's yet again one of those, I think, and I hate to keep beating this drum, but it really goes back to the 70s and the 80s and the 90s when you would get a setting book with a rule set that was built into itself. You didn't have these generic setting, the generic rule sets other than GURPS. And even when you bought a GURPS book, it was built on GURPS, but here's the one specific to what you're playing.
Right.
And all of those came with all of the trappings, all of the minutia built into it for that specific thing. And people got so inured of that being given the ability to do that in Savage Worlds, it's like you've always been handed model kits, and then someone hands you a box of balsa wood and glue to build the same model. It's completely different to have to do that from scratch. And I think that's the hurdle that people have when they come to Savage Worlds, is all of a sudden you're building that model from scratch, and you have to cut all the balsa wood to fit.
But at the same time, that's one of Savage Worlds' appeal.
Yeah.
Is that you are only limited by your creativity.
Right. Well,
you can change if you want.
Let's talk about this. Let's talk about how far we want to go with Vulcans and mysticism. You create, there's the whole thing with, wait, what about the mind meld? What about the Vulcan nerve pinch? What about all of this? You just retrap miracles, arcane background miracles as Vulcan mysticism. That brings in the major sins and code of honors, showing emotion, blah, blah, blah. You must meditate 4 hours a day, whatever. And then you get the following powers. You get sleep as the Vulcan nerve pinch, done as a power you can take. You get mind reading, and you can maybe even work it up. That's really pretty much it, right? I mean, the mind meld and mind reading. This is the Vulcan nerve pinch and mind reading, right?
Well,
that's pretty much it.
Well, they are stronger.
Yeah, but that's not from the background. That would be the racial.
That's just built.
That's a high gravity, hot, arid world. So
here's the thing about it, though. Is that a racial aspect of the Vulcans? Can all Vulcans do the mind meld, or is that something that they have to learn? Because
they have to learn it.
Okay, so our Romulans are effectively Vulcans, right?
Oh, yeah, you're going to pick up a bunch of Trekkies.
They're supposed to be schismed.
There's a schism, right?
Related.
So Romulans don't have the same access to powers, and likewise, they don't have the same physical strength as the Vulcans.
Mm-hmm.
But if we get down to it, are the Vulcans the elves and the Romulans the drow?
To a certain extent.
Yeah.
But again, we're pissing off Trekkies, so
please address all hate mail to Dustin at Savage GM Podcast.
Well, wait a minute. They're very distinctive starships and blah blah. Yes, there are.
Yeah.
Great. And there's this whole thing called FASA Star Trek that really delves deep into that. For Savage Worlds terminology, pick something out of the watercraft section, and then start applying things by scale. It's either small, medium, large, or gargantuan. Done. You can say, hey, a Vulcan, a Romulan warbird is this, and it has invisibility as a power.
So we have a question from chat that I think fits perfectly with you talking about the, just taking naval units and making them starships.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the Oh, where is it here? Did you grab the one about the dogfight, Dustin?
Yes, it's in the trenches on the Death Star.
Go ahead and read it
Starling
off, Dustin.
Kindred.
Sunset Sam.
All right, hold on a second.
Oh yeah, there.
Hard Shrub, Sunset Sin. Have any of you done a multiplayer dogfight a la Death Star Trench Run?
No.
So I'm gonna take this one and blow it up and say, I don't want to just talk about dogfights, but all combat between vehicles in a sci-fi setting.
Mm-hmm.
So much easier if you go Theater of the Mind, or if you go with very oblique kind of abstract stuff like the chase maneuver, because and it's an inborn trait to the way they wrote Savage Worlds, having to create a galactic unit of measure to scale your inches by, and then using some of the acceleration rules that are in Savage Worlds for those bigger starfighters and whatnot are just insane. All of a sudden you need, a 20-foot by 20-foot room that you're going to put minis down on the floor and move them around because you're dealing with such high speeds. It's a lot easier to break that out and run it at an abstract through like the chase rules, or to break it out and run it as
Mass battle?
As a Theater of the Mind, where you can just describe them moving to long range, to medium range, instead of having to worry about deftly maneuvering them around. There was a tabletop game called Wings of War that they adapted in the X-Wing Starfighter tabletop game that Fantasy Flight Games you built on it. But it actually had like these little sticks you attached to a stand to show what elevation the plane was at, and it had little maneuver cards that you had to play to determine how far the thing could turn and how far it drifted based on the speed it was going. And it was all great. And then they went from Wings of War to Wings of War 2, Aces of World War II. They went from biplanes and triplanes to the nominal first fighter jets and the turboprop planes of World War II. And all the rules broke because suddenly you didn't have enough table to play it on, and you didn't have enough sticks to track that vertical movement. There's so much there that when you abstract it in something like mass battles, the chase rules, it just takes away the difficulty of replicating that on the tabletop.
Right.
I'm going to pose a question. All right. So if nobody is on foot and there is no regular person trying to move at regular people speed, it becomes relative to the other vehicles, right?
Mm-hmm. The Sci-Fi Companion has a rule that you're supposed to reduce everything basically by 5 when you're talking about the number of inches. It's a multiple of 5 going from like vehicular scale to person scale. So if you're just dealing with the vehicles, you reduce the speed of everything listed by 5.
Yep.
I ran into that quite a bit when I was doing the conversion for walkers and battle mechs, and I had to actually come up with, well, how far can a guy on foot run if he's trying to run away from a giant, 30-foot high battle mech that's chasing him across the battlefield?
All the way to his
not fast enough.
Yeah, he can run that race all the way to his grave.
Well, and
because he's about to get stepped on.
And I think this is something that's lost on the role-playing game version of the Trekkie. Starfleet battles are not about tactical. It's not a tactical exercise. If you look at any Star Trek movie, TV show, anything, the combat is always just a metaphor for drama and conflict. It's not meant to be, the forward firing phaser arc on this one is superior to that one at an angle of the trajectory to the sun.
How much do we mess up their hair and tear their costume before we have them be the winner?
Right. the whole thing with the cloaking device is not a tactical advantage. It's a story plot device. Oh shit! There's a vehicle out there that's pinned to just pop up and destroy us. How do we figure out where it is? Where's the drama? Where's the tension?
Well, and the interesting thing there that the sci-fi genre gives you is something we've been talking about the last couple of episodes, which is don't challenge the players with combat. Don't make it about combat. Use that combat as a metaphor for whatever's going on. You know, what's the scientific approach to finding a cloaked ship when your sensors can't detect it because of how high grade the cloak is? And then put that in front of your players and make them run a dramatic task or something to determine that, hey, so they can, you know, angle the deflector dish to pick up the blah, blah, blah particle that's being emitted by the blah, blah, blah drive, and bam, you know.
Trap it with technobabble.
Technobabble, smarts roll.
Technobabble, notice roll for your system ship sensors. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I think that there's a lot to learn from things like mass battle and the chase rules when it comes to those scenarios. I hear a lot of people say, well, I would play X if they ever put out a good dogfight rule. Or I would play Y if they ever put out a good rule for, you know, naval combat. And it's like, but why do you want that? Are the player characters, each player character in control of their own enterprise?
I feel like this is the point where if Scott was here, he would really have something to say, because as best my understanding is, you know, Star Destroyers or destroyer crafts aren't just sort of like running around in a circle. They just sort of stop and fire at one another. I mean, you know, like evasive maneuvers. What do you mean? Like lean to the left a bit?
Right. Well, it's all about the drama. It's just
what was that joke that they did in Blue Harvest, the Family Guy version of Star Trek, where he said, "Don't worry, kid, I know a great maneuver," and then they cut to the guys in the Death Star, and they're like, "Oh my God, he's listing lazily to the left. This guy really knows some maneuvers."
Right.
You know, when you're talking about something that moves and it's a small moon, your maneuver means dick.
Right.
You did a barrel roll. It didn't change nothing because the laser it's going to shoot at you is half the size of a planet.
Well, and here's the thing too. It's and it sounds like, well, wait a minute. Where's the excitement in a sci-fi like trench run when you just do a chase? That's make a piloting roll and draw some cards, and then whoever has the higher card and check a table. Yeah, it can be that way if you settle for running it that way. And I'm going to share something in our last Friday night game. We're playing a mafioso game. The characters get at one point where they're being chased by a crooked Irish cop. And they're in 1970s vehicles. We're talking all steel, everything, V8 engines, and we're starting to draw, and the person's like, okay, I'm gonna make my next roll. Whoa, wait a minute. Describe what just happened in this round. What's happening? What's the scenery? What's it looking like? And then they got advantage and went, hey, could I like take a sudden left turn down a one-way street? And as a way to like try to force him to keep up and then maybe get hit by something or get distracted? Absolutely. That's called a force maneuver. Give me your driving roll, his opposed driving roll. We described it as, you know, horns honking as you're coming at it. You have to add the role play to these combats, just like you would want the player characters to add role play to a persuasion roll or anything else. Of course, it seems flat and boring if it's like, all right, give me a roll. All right. Oh, no clubs, no complication. All right. You know, who has the highest card? Okay. What do you do? No, I'm gonna try to hit him. Okay, make me a fighting roll. Oh, what? Oh, sorry, huh? Yeah. You got to describe what the story is. You know, at the last moment, the TIE fighter my fighter does this barrel roll, and does like a U-turn thing, comes up behind him and fires on him. Oh shit! That's where your excitement is in that dogfight.
What I would say, if you're trying to run, say, a dogfight as a chase, and the opponent draws a horrible card, they draw, not only is it a club, but it's like a deuce. So it's the worst thing that can happen. Immediately turn to the player character that drew the best card and go, what maneuver did you pull to outrun them or to outmaneuver them? And let the player have an exciting, amazing moment based on the fact that a card was drawn for the enemy that put the enemy in a bad position. That's a great time to say, well, the enemy's in a bad position. What did you do to get him there?
Right. Okay, so I think we sufficiently beat the Star Trek horse to death. I would say one added thing, and this is just something because Star Trek has a kind of a pulp flavor to it a little bit, little James Bond, Zorro kind of flair to it. The obvious red shirt, the obvious red shirt ploy. Take a thing from Daring Tales about mooks and say, hey, they have no wounds. There are no wounds. If you shake them, they're dead or they're down. And just give your extra security guards and red shirts. They're extras in every other way, except all you need to wipe them out is shake them. They're done. Shaken is equal to a wound. Done.
I would also say with a good number of these settings, you want to immediately apply both the Born a Hero setting rule as well as the Heroes Never Die setting rule.
Heroes Never Die. Yep.
And here's the reason I say that. So many people get their hackles up when they hear Heroes Never Die. Well, no, if there's no danger, there's no drama, etc. My problem with that is that we're dealing with science fiction capacity medicine. They run over, they grab your unconscious body, shove a tube into your mouth, and throw you in this magical blue tank, and you walk out the next day fully healed, having regrown that entire missing torso and leg that was bitten off by the alien.
Right. Yeah, I would say let's suspend the golden hour kind of rules in a high sci-fi like Star Trek. Oh, the bio bed. Oh, we could do healing after the golden hour.
Yeah,
bio
healing.
bed.
Yeah. It's greater healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It's a high tech device, greater healing.
Just watch the Orville. If you want to see some of that.
The first aid skill when it's used doesn't take 10 minutes per use because it's literally a reach in this bag, pull up this gun and stick it in your neck.
Right. And let's about another big trope from the Star Trek franchise, and then we'll move on to something like Star Wars, for example. But one of the big things too, like, oh well, we're gonna do some plastic surgery in the med bay to make Captain Kirk look like a Romulan. Okay, it's the healing skill, but here's the thing: you go ahead and do him up, but when he goes to face the Romulan commander, he has to give you a persuasion roll, and then give me a healing roll to see how well the surgeon did in creating that disguise as a complimentary role. And you could just do that as a cooperative role and try to pass it off as persuasion versus notice. Very simple, easy things to do with Savage Worlds when you stop and kind of don't get married to a literal interpretation of skills and gear and everything else. Okay, so let's talk some Star Wars. How hard is it in Star Wars? Do you need a sci-fi companion? No. Core rules will do it. I know we're kind of core rules purists. I think there may be a spot on the bingo card if you're playing along that may mention something about run it rules as written. Go ahead and mark that off if we're talking about it. I would say like Star Wars, it's the Jedi. We talked about it before. It's miracles. It's arcane background miracles.
I feel like we have beaten Star Wars and the Jedi thing and so much of this into just paste over so many episodes that the only things that stand out are the easy ones. The Superpowers Companion is written to be on par, point for point, power balance to the Sci-Fi Companion.
Right.
So feel free to make your Jedi superheroes. Or feel free to go the other direction if you're going to go more core rules and make them, arcane background miracles, because that code is the same thing as the religious part of that, and having sins. And then obviously there's the trappings discussion that we have. The biggest one being Jesus Christ, a lightsaber is nothing more than the chainsaw.
Yep.
It's not the katana. I know everybody gets there. Oh, it's the katana. No, it's not the katana. Lightsaber is the chainsaw because it hurts you if you fuck up.
Yep.
It's an elegant weapon from a forgotten age, but it's pretty brutal. All right, so I'm glad you mentioned the whole sci-fi companion on par with supers. Some of you may or may not know that Savage Worlds, the G+, there's a Savage Rifts G+ community, and a lot of times things related to the sci-fi companion and related to the supers companion will come up. And it will come up in topics. Shout out to the guys over there. Hey, how's it going? One of the things that I found out is that if you look at some of the different like power levels, obviously like they have 4-color, but then people are like, well, can I use a Mars character? Yes. I broke it down, I looked at it, and I found out something very strange. Mars characters are Street Fighter level. Street Fighter level superpowers, and then just a bunch of random rolls to grant you attributes, edges, and skills in order to compensate to bring you up to 4-color. So yeah, if you really want to do high-powered sci-fi, the Superpowers Companion, if you can wrap your head around it, will absolutely do it.
Mm-hmm.
So
and
how do you do...
It takes a lot of the trapping work, and that's why Rifts took so long for Sean to come out with.
Right.
Rifts required that Sean drive himself through all those old Rifts books and then trap all this stuff from the Sci-Fi Companion, the Superpowers Companion, to recreate it all.
Right. Like literally when you are looking at the cybernetics, you are looking at a point buy system for superpowers. If you got the auto healing, you're getting regeneration, maybe level 3 or 2. I'm lost. If you're getting subdermal armor, you're getting the armor power at like maybe level 3 because it's 1 point per level. If you just look at it, if you just see past it, you can see the matrix. Any kind of sci-fi setting or superhero setting or even magic setting that is like up there, it's a Superpowers Companion, because the Superpowers Companion gives you the mechanical builds for items and for the method of doing it.
Well, you mentioned the Matrix. Jared, didn't you run a Matrix game using the Superpowers Companion?
To a degree, yeah. To a limited degree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can absolutely do it with the Superpowers Companion. Just make them street-level fighters. There's a couple little setting rules and, little tweaks that you put in there. But, yeah, what is, damage in the Matrix? They never take wounds. It's just all fatigue. But once the fatigue bar... Yeah, once the fatigue bar goes past exhausted, then they start taking wounds in the real world until they drop in the real world, and then boom, you're dead in the Matrix. So you can have somebody sit there pumping you full of like adrenaline and shit trying to keep you up and running, but you don't suffer any of the penalties in the Matrix. But I mean, those are like little sort of setting rule things that we've talked about before. Like, how do you simulate it the easiest way with Savage Worlds without getting too bogged down in minutia? But yeah, you can totally run a Matrix campaign using Superpowers Companion. I mean, hell, you could do it running Deadlands. You could use the Deadlands core setting rules for, some of the monsters and shit as agents or programs. And just, boom, you're running it in the Matrix. You'll hear this all the time. Oh, well, you would need to have 2 character sheets. No, you don't need 2 character sheets.
Nope.
Fuck that shit. When you get into the Matrix, you just automatically have an arcane background, and you start, I would say, almost like superpowers and download skills and all kinds of shit. It's really easy to do with PowerPoints.
Everyone starts with arcane background the Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the Matrix, your arcane skill die is your skill at everything.
Yep.
Well, I want to throw something out for, since we're on the subject of like virtual or augmented realities. One of the things that's hard for a lot of players, at least I think, is the concept of relativity. If you are in the Matrix, everything is relative to your sense of perception. So why not just have a bunch of powers that represent what you imagine happening? You want to like teleport? Okay, you teleport. You want to run up the wall and kick somebody in the face? You have the wall walker power. If you are in the real world and you want to make an avatar to go through augmented reality so that you have like an AI ghost, consider the horror companion, Children of the Night, Phantom. And instead of salt preventing you from going anywhere, it's an ICE program, an ICE countermeasure. If you want to steal things, instead of spirit to affect the physical world, it's your hacking skill or your knowledge programming to actually get through and move things around and control drones.
Right. Well, and so much of what you could do in a major Matrix session, like, okay, for example, that whole we're going to walk into the building with a shit ton of guns, that whole sequence, just a dramatic task.
Mm-hmm.
Using agility. It's all agility, and then,
and a whole lot of narration of cool shit every time a card is flipped and they roll a success.
Right.
Done.
Yeah, hacking in the Matrix is finding a secure broadcast channel is a hacking dramatic task. It's just it's once you drink enough of the Savage Worlds Kool-Aid, so to speak, it just all becomes very like, oh, of course. How would you do it any other? Why? I don't need to reinvent the wheel. The rule's already there. I just need to steal it and reimagine it.
Ruben asks a question in chat, and I'm going to throw it out you guys a special way. Ruben goes, I imagined y'all dealt with or heard of time travel, a typical sci-fi trope. First of all, I do want to just say, fuck you, Ruben. Second of all, I'm going to say, so how would you guys run a time cop or a quantum leap type sci-fi? Or is the answer, don't fuck with time?
No.
Don't step on the butterfly. God, don't step on the butterfly.
With time, but remember what I said before, it's relative, right? So your players aren't going to see time change around them, are they?
Well, it depends on your conception.
Right.
I was going to say, if you go with the Back to the Future thing, the character is not aware of the things that they were suddenly supposed to be aware of because they changed the timeline and come back. They're in the new time, but they didn't experience anything that led up to that new time. So they are a fish out of water in their own time because they fucked up and stepped on the butterfly.
Which means relatively speaking, nothing changed. But everything changed. Nothing for them in their little personal bubble changed. So the players are seeing a new world and a new experience.
Well, to quote Doctor Who, timey-wimey, wobbly. Here's the way I envision time travel. I mean, you can really break it down and get very complicated with it. But that's not where the fun of a time travel story comes from. The time travel is fucking warp drive. It's just a plot device to move you from one environment, the present, into the past. I mean,
yeah, I guess it depends on how deep you really feel like getting into it. I like your way, Jared. It just happens. It just happens. We're going into the past, and don't overthink it and make it too difficult.
Right. Yeah. You opened a truck stop bathroom door in Alabama and walked in, and next thing you know, you're in medieval England.
Mm-hmm. Make sure to bring a towel to protect you from the ravenous beast.
Now, deal with you being in medieval England. Okay, well, I'm going to do, well, hold on a second. I'm going to need a knowledge history roll. Do you have this? Oh, well, give me a, oh, you don't know. You don't know. And that's where the fun in a time travel game comes from, in my opinion, is the whole just fish out of water. How do I do this? How do I do that? You can come up with rules for, hey, what happens if you encounter yourself? Is it a doppelganger? Do you and every time travel movie has its own little, here's how what makes our time travel different. Our time machine is a Ferrari, or time travel and time cop. Two people cannot not occupy the same space or time where they turn into this, Cthulian blob and disintegrate.
Okay, which is ironic because, the human body changes itself every 7 years.
Stop. Here's where it always goes wrong with any sci-fi role-playing game. It's when somebody brings some actual fucking knowledge and drops it in the middle of the game. Look, we get it. We're all nerds. Don't do that shit. You'll ruin the game.
And here's it's the George Lucas approach. With Savage Worlds, you want to take the George Lucas approach, which is, don't bother me with details. Okay, wait a minute. Chewbacca is a Wookiee who speaks no English and only speaks Wookiee. Han Solo is a human who only speaks English. How the hell are they communicating? Now, if you ask George Lucas that, details. The fan base came up, well, see, Han Solo understands the Wookiee language, and Chewbacca understands the English language.
Thank you.
Therefore, shut up. George Lucas had no concept of that. What makes Chewbacca cool? All right, there, done. Okay. Why does Princess Leia talk with a British accent in the first 15 minutes of Star Wars: A New Hope, and then never ever again? Details.
Because she got to stand next to a really famous actor
who was speaking with a British accent.
Right. Before the actress spoke with a British accent.
Right.
Guys, that's not even what gets me. What gets me is how in the hell is Han Solo calculating time in parsecs?
Exactly.
Like he's using distance to calculate time.
Exactly. Details. Don't bother me with details. Did you see the special effects? Did you catch that camera angle? That's what's important.
They're fighting with laser swords and using magic in space. That's what people want.
Now, Scarlett nailed this one because.
Right. Well, wait a minute. How is there a fireball explosion in space? Shut up. There's no oxygen. Shut up. Wait a minute. How can we hear the TIE fighters go?
Because we can.
That's why.
Cool, folks. Don't get out in the bushes. Don't get out in the weeds. Just have some fun with that shit. And as soon as one of your players starts to argue some pedantic point of actual real-world science or something they read about the setting in some novel 15 years ago, tell them no. Tell them that's not how the game's going to go. And if they continue to argue about it, treat it like you would any other time that a player argues with the GM about a rule. Whether your table, that means throw the fucker out, whether it's a 3-strike thing, it's a vote among the other players to how much time is that person wasting. Don't let your game get bogged down simply because someone goes, well, the quantum theory, blah, blah, blah. Techno-babble. Bullshit. Out of my game.
Right. Or you do the Bill and Ted thing about time travel. Hey, it would be really cool if we had our keys here in the jail cell. So let's remind ourselves before we do this that we go and do this. And they have that dialogue and bam. Oh, look, there's a tape recorder there.
I would say that J.J. Abrams shows up and blinds you with lens flare.
Yeah, that would work too. Why is your time machine a phone booth, and why is it bigger on the inside? Shut up. Because it's cool. That's why.
Techno babble, roll for initiative.
The phone booth was not bigger on the inside. It was the police box that was bigger on the inside.
Phone booth. Call it what you want, phone booth. You're missing the point. The really cool thing are the Daleks and the way they talk. That's what's cool.
You mean the cheese grater with a plunger stuck in it?
Yes.
All right, if you want to get down
Those
to
are frightening, aren't they?
they are absolutely terrifying that the BBC, that the most dangerous character in the universe is a rogue trash can with a bad attitude.
A plunger for a fucking attack weapon.
It's awesome. It's awesome. And I think more than anything else, if you're going to run a time travel, you as a GM have to know how time travel works, at least on some level.
Oh my gosh. Doctor Who is a deranged lunatic that stole a car and attacked aliens with a screwdriver.
Right. Exactly. So I mean, you can have some kind of foreshadowing mechanic for Doctor Who. If you're going to play Doctor Who, it's like, listen, he gets so many bennies to just drop as Time Lord bennies and go, boom, check this out, bitches. Here's what's really going on, and just completely take control of the narrative. And then everybody just has to sort of go, all right, well, I guess that's what happened. I guess that's how you get dinosaurs on a spaceship. All right, okay. So that's my answer to how I run a time travel game. Any way I fucking want to, because it doesn't matter. There are no mechanics or setting rules that you're going to apply that are ever going to make any sense to anybody, and they shouldn't. It's warp drive.
Don't do it with like a Whovian at the table.
Yeah, no.
Don't even try.
Oh, it gets even better because like that you can have two different generations and they'll argue with each other.
Yep. So did we cover transhumanism we were starting to have that kind of conversation about augmented reality and all of that, right?
Well, transhumanism to me is not a mechanics question at all. It's entirely narrative. You know, when you start getting into transhumanism, it's not about how do you run the mechanics of a transhumanism game, whether you're doing augmented reality with superpowers or you're doing cybernetics with the slot list from the sci-fi companion, or if you're even doing like Interface Zero where they've got, you know, the long-winded mechanics that they used for it. Transhumanism should be less about that mechanic and more about the story of people becoming something other than regular people and what that does to the social fabric within the societies of your game and the effect that that's going to have on the plot. That should be far more important to you as a GM running that game than the mechanics of how the cybernetic arms work or what means in your game.
So think about it like this. You're absolutely right, Dave. Does having cybernetics make you an outsider? Does it put you in debt? Where did you get it from? Do people see you walking around with cybernetic parts and assume that you work for the mob, the military, or a mega corporation and therefore steer clear of you? I mean, if you want to, like, cybernetics would really just either give you a power or some kind of buff, like maybe toughness or strength. But really, honestly, it's the background weird science and just the powers apply to you.
Well, that's true too. You could also just say, hey, you know, how prevalent is cybernetics in society? If you have a society where it is just running rampant AI and cybernetics, then just pick edges.
Yeah.
And trap them as cybernetics. Like Two-Fisted is now a computer chip that you put in your arm, and you don't need PowerPoints to operate. It's just an edge.
Your character learns a new skill that you've never had before. It's skill chipped in, or you know, however you want to handle those different things that your character just gradually gains every time they spend experience and get an advance.
So think about it like this, all right? The character Molly Millions from Neuromancer. She has sharp nails that are biological weapons, and or cybernetic weapons, and she has eyes that let her see in the dark. Okay, she has the martial artist edge. Strength plus D4. People don't get a gang up bonus. All right. And then she has dark sight. That's it. That's all she's got. And she uses it to her advantage. You see the guy that pops a sword out of his arm? Improved martial artist. He's rolling a D6 instead of a D4.
Or that's quick draw.
Or
that's
quick
your
draw.
explanation of quick draw. It just the blade comes right out of his hand. Now here's the interesting thing.
To buy the blade out of his equipment list, but now it shoots out of his arm and he can't be disarmed.
Right. Or you do one of these things too, where you go, okay, well, in order to buy that piece of equipment, you're gonna have to come up with some money. So here's a hindrance. We're gonna take your arm off to install this piece of cyberware. And when you roll a 1 on anything you're doing with that arm, it malfunctions. Now you have the 1 arm hindrance until you go do a street dock or a cyber dock and get that fixed.
Now, I hate to say this, but I mean, Ruben does bring up a good point. I mean, if you need a quick and dirty method to do this, take a look at Rippers.
Yeah.
All that Ripper tech is an amazing treatment on how to handle transhumanism in your game, and it's right there in an official PEG product.
Yep.
Rippers proves the point that it is just mechanics, because if it's parts from monsters that give you these powers, or if it's parts from machines, it's just mechanically is what does it do?
Parts is parts.
What effect does it have on the game? And I think here's one of the pitfalls for running sci-fi. And I'm going to go ahead and throw this out here. As gamers, I think we tend to become too much of min-maxy little bitches when it comes to sci-fi. Oh, I want specific rules for dogfights. I want specific this or that. I want to know how we do this or that or the other. And I think one of the pitfalls is getting too much of a tunnel vision on the minutia of it and not realizing and remembering that at the end of the day, those are all just trappings. What's the story? Where's your role play? What's the story? What's the consequence? Okay, a lightsaber can cut through steel like a knife through butter, a hot knife through butter. So what? Who cares? You got a cool light sword. Whoopity fucking do. What's the story? Are you hunted because people have turned the entire galaxy against your religion and now you're on the run? Now that lightsaber becomes something much more important than a piece of gear. It becomes a symbol for the storytelling, for the narrative of the thing. And I think that if we're talking Star Trek, for example, we were talking about that earlier. One of the things that made Star Trek as popular and as well received as it was it was really about racism, sexism, equality, and telling a positive human story. It was not about the phasers and the warp drive and everything else. That's all scenery. Yeah. Where's the dialogue? Where's the character?
Roddenberry's, utopianistic idea of the future used to tell a wagon train to the stars story, which is carte blanche for what TV was in the 70s when the show first aired. I mean, why do you think it has the structure it has? Go back and actually watch any of the late 60s and early 70s freaking westerns, and you will see the exact same story structure as you see in the entire first original series of Star Trek. And you'll see that even to this day in Star Trek, it still clings fairly close to that type of a story structure. All the fancy gadgets and technobabble are really just there to cover up a very, very central Western-esque story.
Yeah.
Right.
So I was watching a video of Wisecrack the other day, and do you know what else is a Western? Logan.
Yeah.
It's a Western because you have the concept of enclosure. You have the whole idea of a savage frontier that you know nothing about, that you're going out to discover more of. That's Star Trek in a nutshell. To
Yep.
boldly go where no one has gone before. And that's all Western comes down to, is to take a place that is not specifically civilized, or not civilized in the way that we would understand it, and explore that area, explore that region to see what's going on there.
Yep.
Well, and I think one of the things we're trying to say is, don't get so lost in the mechanics of what am I sourcing from the Sci-Fi Companion, what am I sourcing from the Superpowers Companion, what am I sourcing from Core Rules, what am I sourcing from Deadlands or ETU or Slipstream, and forget about the fact you need to tell a engaging narrative story that's way more important than those mechanics.
Right.
If you want to handle cyberware and cybernetics as something that's right out of Rippers, right out of Interface Zero, right out of the Sci-Fi Companion, none of that is going to have a bearing on the way you're narratively going to run. What's the opinion of people to you showing up with no real tissue on your body anymore and a whole bunch of metal? How do people treat you as a person when you show up and you're basically a walking battle tank?
Yeah, do you cease to be human?
Yeah. Do you have to take an edge or do you have to take a hindrance that shows that, hey, part of this is your programming now?
Right.
Or do you have that check your guns at the door problem of you can't, so you're not allowed in places any longer?
Right.
You are persona non gratis in all government buildings because you can't leave your attached arm blades or your photographic bionic memory at the door, and they don't want you taking snapshots of the layout of the inside of the building. And because your eyes just naturally are able to do that, you're not allowed in.
Right. It's he's more machine now than man, twisted and evil. That whole exploration of how far do you become cybernetic, where you lose your humanity. And here's the other thing too, is like we've talked about horror as a flavor you can sprinkle on things. Sci-fi is the same way. It's really, at the end of the day, it's a nice skin or wrapper for you could take Shakespeare's, any Shakespeare play, any tragedy, take Hamlet and go, okay, we're gonna do Hamlet in space. We're just not gonna call him Hamlet, but we're gonna run that same story arc, but we're gonna do it in this sci-fi-esque setting. Alien, one of the first sci-fi horror movies that wasn't a cheap, cheesy popcorn monster of the week type deal. Doing like the hibernation, like, okay, well, we're in cryo sleep. Oh, I need some complicated mechanic for. No, you don't. No, you don't. I don't know. Give me a vigor roll to come out of cryo and avoid a level of fatigue.
Yep.
That's it. Done. Just done.
Well, Christopher Moore mentions the Daring Tales series, Daring Tales of the Space Link.
Absolutely.
And then there's also Daring Tales of the Sprawl. I think the interesting thing there goes back to what we said early on in the show is, those are 10-page documents that are, again, double spaced, column width, the whole 9 yards, and they have all the rules necessary to run that particular flavor of sci-fi. And I think the interesting aspect of it is that what they don't provide you is a story to run. That's where, again, you have to double down on making sure you've got an interesting story for your players to play in long before you have to worry about any of these mechanics.
So
what was the I'm going to go off on a tangent here, so bear with me for just a second. What was the mid 90s or late 90s TV show with oh God, what's the actress's name? Sue Richards.
Fantastic Four?
Yeah, the actress that played Sue Richards in the Fantastic Four.
Dark Angel, Jessica Alba.
Yeah, Dark Angel. So that would be a great dystopian sci-fi to run where they're genetically engineered psionic fucking super bad, and one of them escapes. Or your whole group escapes and they're on the run. So then it becomes, I've got all these powers. who do I trust? There's a whole investigative part of that game that could be a lot of fun to run that kind of story in a sci-fi. Just want to throw that out there. You could use Deadlands Noir and run Dark Angel and just give them psionic, build them a street level supers with the superpowers companion, then hop over to Deadlands Noir and use their investigation mechanics, and you're done. You're good. You've got a solid campaign to run.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you wanna go that route, personally, I don't know if anybody else has ever thought about this. Just playing off what you just said, Jared. Deadlands Noir makes for a great cyberpunk setting in and of itself. All you have to do is to just, like we said, take some cats and make them drones and give people weird science or patent science as the arcane background cybernetic. And you can run a cyberpunk setting from there. The agents are employees of the megacorps, and they have to keep things quiet so that it doesn't go back to them. You can use the cities if you wanted to, like the actual cities like New Orleans and Chicago from the companion, and you're good to go.
Just put a city noir escape over it instead of New Orleans 40s.
Yeah.
Do a little tech noir to it. You're done.
I don't know if anybody knows this, but like in Deadlands Noir, in the actual Deadlands Noir, one of the setting points is that the mayor rigged the election.
Oh, spoilers.
Sorry. Spoiler. Please address all hate mail to Dustin at Savage GM Podcast.
In the Deadlands universe, what is it when you come back? It's not Haggard.
Harrowed.
Yeah, so you make all the agents of the Megacorp Harrowed.
Yeah. No, if you wanted to get down to it, you could probably even try making a cyborg out of a Harrowed, because you have to do the whole Dominion role. Like, you're fighting against that technology. In Hell on Earth, you actually have to be Harrowed if you're going to be cyborg.
I don't want to get too far off on a tangent here, but you brought up the Harrowed, Jared. It made me think of a recent G Plus conversation where people were talking about, why you can't run any setting rule you want with, or make any house rule you want with a Savage setting without actually playing it a few times. And the Harrowed was one of the examples that came up. It was like, yeah, so tell me exactly how your players ever become Harrowed in Deadlands if you're running Heroes Never Die.
Right.
But it is absolutely one of those things. Like, the other aspect of breaking this the way we're talking about and grabbing bits and pieces of different things and jamming them together based on the sci-fi companion, the superpowers companion, and core, is it frees you from having to make house rules to make a setting fit the story you're telling. Yes, Slipstream is probably one of the best fully encapsulated sci-fi storytelling settings that has come out from Pinnacle. But it is absolutely unnecessary to take Slipstream and dump in bushels of house rules to make it run like Star Wars or Firefly, when you can just build those from the ground up with core rules and the stuff from the different companions, because you're going to have a better experience than you're going to have when you try to repurpose an existing setting and then break one of the cardinal rules of that setting. And then 13 sessions in, some player does the thing that setting covered, and you've since broken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just once again, we just come back to the basic core tenet of the show, I think, is take a buffet style approach to the settings that are out there. Cannibalize freely. Make it work for, it's all at the, no matter how you slice it, trappings, and your own imagination make Savage Worlds what it is for whatever kind of genre you're running. If you want to do a zombie apocalypse, go ahead, pick it up, put a layer of space on it, and they're cybernetic. They're nanites that have been gone horribly, horribly wrong, and now they're killing people. And now it's the Borg, or space zombies. There, you're done. You're running a space zombie campaign, and you're running it in Savage Worlds. Go ahead and use the sci-fi companion, or don't use the core rules if you don't have the sci-fi companion. I would say just don't be afraid to. Well, I can't run any sci-fi without the sci-fi companion. Of course you can. Of course you. Oh, I can't afford the sci-fi companion right now. That's okay. You don't need it. If you can't afford it, go ahead. Just use the core.
The companions are good books, and I don't want it to seem like we're trash talking them, but they are not the end all be all the way. So, back in, again, where I said the 70s, 80s, and 90s of gaming, where if I didn't go out and buy the what was it, the Wizards of the Coast Star Wars treatment, I couldn't take D&D 3.5 and play Star Wars. I needed that additional book that had all the rules for how they applied it and the classes that were appropriate to the setting, etc. Savage Worlds doesn't have that problem. So don't let yourself get stuck in this mindset that you need somebody else's book to tell you how to tell your sci-fi story. Just add some trappings to the tools you already have and run with it.
All right. It's the childhood imagination version of, hey, this cool stick I found kind of looks like a gun. And everybody goes, oh, we're playing make-believe. Okay, well, there's a prop that kind of looks like a gun. It's a gun. That's essentially how Savage Worlds works. Here's the trapping for a gun. You want to make it a laser gun? That's fine. Just call it a laser gun. Go ahead and use the rules.
Just add some AP to it.
It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Okay, so do we have any winners of the bingo? Anybody shout out bingo in the game?
We had 2 winners. Let's see here. They won a long time ago.
Holy crap, that early?
Yeah. Ruben Riviera.
I told you early on, Jared, that if anyone actually played it as a drinking game, we were going to get lawsuits because someone's going to die.
Yeah, we were in. I don't know. Are we going to add no lower third for me? Because I think that's just a given at this point.
Free space every time.
Free space that's on the card is that Jim doesn't show up because of technical difficulties, or Dustin doesn't have a lower third.
I'm just gonna say, Google, you magnificent overlord machine. If you are spying on us, please fix this.
All right. Well, with that, we'll wrap it up. So until next time, this is Jared Savage Daddy Gunning for Chris, Dave, and Dustin saying keep rolling and stay savage.